it's not about replacing lawyers through automation. It's about helping them level up to codify their expertise so that they could be working on more complex legal issues.
Today on Law Next, a conversation about the role of user interface and user experience design. How important are they in driving or inhibiting adoption of legal technology? I'm joined by two guests, Nicole Bradick, founder and CEO of the legal design and development firm Theory and Principle, and Andy Wishart, Chief Product Officer at contract lifecycle management company Agiloft. Both have years of experience designing legal tech products, and they also recently worked together on a project to redesign Agiloft's UI. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. My guests will be coming right up, but first, a quick note about the sponsors whose generosity makes this show possible. Paradigm believes that when perspectives shift, possibilities unfold. Paradigm offers 4 leading legal software solutions that help you manage, automate, and grow your firm. The practice management platforms Practice Panther, Bill for Time, and Mariscase, and the online payment solution HeadNote. Learn why more than 40,000 lawyers trust its products to shift the paradigm of how they practice law. Learn more at joinparadigm.com. Now, on to today's interview. Andy and Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Good to have you both. And just to flesh out the introduction a little bit, I'm going to ask each of you to kind of tell us a little bit more about your background and what you do, rather than that 1-second introduction I just gave you. So, Nicole, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Theory and Principle, as you mentioned. We're a design and development agency that serves the legal industry globally. So we work with law firms, nonprofits, and legal tech companies with a very strong focus on user experience, user interface design. We sort of casually refer to our mission as to make legal technology less terrible. And we had the great honor to work with Agiloft and would love to and excited to be here to talk to you about that today.
And you have the even greater honor of having been guest number 1 on this podcast.
I
way back.
I'm
sure you achieved world-renowned fame from.
It's the first thing on my bio now, Bob.
Right up above your name where nobody reads. Good. And Andy, tell us more about your background and what you do now and what you did before, which is also relevant to what we're talking about today.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So I'm Andy Wishart. I'm Chief Product Officer at Agiloft, the no-code CLM, enterprise CLM solution used by corporations globally to manage their contracts. I've been in legal tech for 21 years now. I was co-founder and CTO of Contract Express, the contract automation provider that was acquired by Thomson Reuters back in 2015, and I then went on to lead products in Thomson Reuters like Contract Express, Drafting Assistant, their knowledge management products, and then more recently their contract analysis solution that launched this year. I left Thomson Reuters back in January of this year to take on a new role as Chief Product Officer at Agiloft. I've always sort of been at this intersection of technology and people. My undergrad degree was in artificial intelligence and cognitive psychology. So I've always been really passionate about the interface between technology and humans. And so it's really exciting to be here alongside my friend, Nicole, to talk about UI and user experience.
I'm glad you mentioned that degree because I was going to ask you about it if you didn't. I had never actually noticed that before until I was looking at your LinkedIn profile in preparation for this interview, and I thought, what perfect training for programming robot lawyers or something like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I didn't know it at the time, right, that my career would be more sort of product focused than technology focused. But yeah, really, really good background for the rest of my career, really.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking a lot in this episode about user interface, user experience design. I wonder if it makes sense to talk about first defining what those terms even mean and what we're talking about here. Are they the same thing? What do they mean? Nicole, could you kind of educate us a little bit on that?
Oh, Bob, they're not the same thing. Come on. Sure. User experience and user interface design are both sort of equally important, although we place somewhat of a stronger emphasis on user experience design in our work. User experience design is the way that we design these applications to get somebody from start to finish with the least amount of friction as possible. So if somebody needs to, click a button to generate a widget, we are going to get them from point A to point B as fast as we can with as much clarity as we possibly can, so they always know what they're doing. User interface design is more the look and feel of an application. So that's things like fonts, color palettes, font styles, buttons. We care about things like, what does a button look like when you hover over it versus when you're not hovering? What does it look like when it's engaged versus not engaged? We spend a lot of time thinking about buttons. And both of those two things are pretty critically important for somebody to have a good experience in your application. So part of it is just almost, saleability, like the ability to look at the application and say, okay, this looks clean and neat, and I think I can use that very easily. So that's more user interface. User interface gives those impressions. That's where we're creating the right amount of white space, guiding the user along the way through strongly colored buttons or, giving those sort of visual cues. And then UX is the actual workflow that the user takes. So they all sort of come together to create an experience for the user. And I would say that both have been pretty roundly ignored in legal tech until the last 5 years. They just all threw the color blue at it. If it's blue, it looks legal and serious. Yeah, so does everybody. And I spent a lot of time dissuading people from using blue because there's just too much of it. But it's a discipline that's really become much more important in legal tech in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. As competition increases, people now, it's not like I have the option of using product A or nothing. I have the option of using product A, B, C, or D. I'm going to use the one that A has the functionality that I need, but B is easy to use and easy for my team to adopt.
So, well, Andy, just to expand on that a little bit from your perspective, how critical do you think UI, UX are to adoption of a legal technology product, or to what extent can they inhibit adoption of a legal technology product?
Yeah, so I think they're super important for gaining that sort of widespread adoption. And having been in the legal tech space for 20 years, what Nicole says really resonates with me. There was a time in the past that many legal tech vendors perhaps didn't have the focus on user experience, but competition has now really changed things over the past 5 years or so. I think one thing to recognize is that not all legal tech is the same, right? And different legal tech solutions often require different approaches to user experience or design. There are some point solutions, legal tech solutions that are targeted at really specific types of users. If you think of something, Bob, like litigation analytics solutions, it's primarily responsible for sort of creating the right experience for a litigator that is focused on building the right case strategy and learning as much as possible about similar cases that have been judged in the past. So product and design teams need to build an entire experience around that sort of single persona and go really deep. But I think other solutions like CLM solutions are maybe perhaps a different type of legal tech. And I think they present more of an interest and challenge from a UX design perspective. I think CLM is a little bit more enterprise tech than legal tech because there's a greater variability of users. There's so many different roles in the organization that need to interact with the contracting process. There's obviously the legal users who are extremely important, but there's also, sales, procurement, HR, finance, and any design team needs to think about those personas and how they are interacting with the product to get their work done as well.
Mm-hmm. And just to carry that a little bit further, what's the relationship between UI, UX, and the effectiveness of the technology product itself? Does good design mean good technology, or does good technology always equate with good design? What's the relationship between those two?
I have
Nicole?
opinions.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I know you.
Well, I think that if you have bad design, it can make any feature you have unusable. And so you could have the best technology and the best features, but if people can't intuitively figure out how to use it, they're going to drop off. So bad design will essentially nullify the power of good technology. So I think they're very intertwined. And I think we've seen that, up until, like I said, the past decade or so, legal tech's been really focused on function, and people used it, right? People used it, and nobody complained because we didn't know any better. But now people are getting used to patterns in their day-to-day lives in the consumer, digital technology they use, and so now it makes those products more and more unusable for people because they just can't figure it out.
Right. But the flip side is you can have a very pretty product that doesn't have true functionality, right?
Yeah, but I would say that's
practical
definitely
functionality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it could be not useful for the intended users for sure, but that's a common problem as well. Something that looks real flashy, but nobody has any interest in using it.
Yeah, I think it was you who told me that. That's why I asked you that.
Oh, look at that.
So the two of you had occasion to work together specifically with regard to looking at Agiloft, and I think it's kind of interesting, Andy, because Agiloft is a product that has been around, in one form or another for a long time, like roughly 3 decades or so. It's a long-standing legal tech product. It's obviously evolved over the years. But what was it? And I think some of this even precedes your coming to the company. But what was it that led Agiloft to think that it needed to take a serious look at the design of the product?
Yeah, so Bob, as you mentioned, there is a long history for Agiloft, and in some of our sort of predecessor companies, we've been focusing upon building no-code solutions, enterprise solutions to solve lots of different problems. I think it's probably been in the last 7-8 years that the company has focused exclusively on the contract lifecycle management space by taking this no-code platform that has this sort of configurability and flexibility to solve different contracting workflows, applying that to different use cases within the contract space. And the product had evolved significantly over that period of time. Now, the engagement with Theory and Principle did predate me coming on board as Chief Product Officer. But as I started to have conversations with the Agiloft exec team, and they had mentioned they're working on a project right now with Nicole and her team, I was like absolutely excited to learn more about that and understand how Theory and Principle had been engaged. Nicole, you might be best to talk about the catalyst and the spark for that, because I think it was another mutual friend of ours, Ed at Factor, that connected you with Colin, our CEO at the time at Agiloft.
Ed being Ed Sohn, who's been on this podcast also.
Yeah. So at the time, Ed was at UI Law, and they were doing a lot of implementation of Agiloft. They were big fans of Agiloft, and they were sort of pushing on the former CEO, Colin Earle, who's lovely, to work on sort of updating the design, which, it had been, very, very common of legal tech products that have been around that long. Is very much an engineering-led product. So there was this pure focus on function, and what they had built over the years was incredibly robust, which is why they had been so successful. But I think the recognition is that now you can't just have a very powerful product. You also need to have an intuitive design. So Colin came to us and was willing to allow us to come in and talk to a bunch of users, which I think from a product owner perspective, it's incredibly brave to allow a company to come in who's not associated with you to go out and talk to your users and find out, really where their problems are, how they're using the product. It's not an easy thing to do, and so it was great for us to be able to come in and in that type of engagement and engage with their users in that way.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of what it was that Ed was thinking about in particular when he suggested that? I mean, was it just difficult to use? Did you sort of need consultants to implement it? I mean, what were the pain points for him? Do you know?
Yeah, I think that what we found in our research is that, there's a number of different people that touch a CLM product like this. And there are people who sort of build the workflows to be used internally. And then there are people who actually use the workflows. And the hardest job is of the people who are building the workflows. Because if you think about, a product that's this robust, there's so much they can do within the application that it can tend to get quite cluttered. And it takes a lot of time to learn. It's one of those products where, what we kept hearing, which we hear in other products is, it takes a long time to learn, but once you learn it, it's great. And our goal is to shrink that. We want it to take a lot less time to learn so that people can get up and running and using Agiloft. And, I think certainly, the way competition is now, there's a salability component to products like that. If somebody's looking at that and saying, all right, so I'm going to be the builder of these things and I'm looking at this and this looks way too confusing, it's going to harm salability as well. So I think there were a number of considerations, but we were able to go into it with a completely open mind and no bias brought to it. And we're able to sort of find out where the real issues were.
Andy, at what point did you get involved in this? Where was this project at the point that you joined the company?
Yeah, so when I joined the company back in January, the research and the recommendations by Nicole and her team had been completed and we were in build mode. So I joined mid-cycle for the release that then went out to customers in March earlier this year. So it was really interesting to come in at that point of time where a number of decisions had been made around prioritization for that release. We were working and taking the designs and implementing them within the product. So January when I came on board, and then the first release came out in March, which was that first time where our users would see the output from the work that Theory and Principle had helped us with last year.
We're talking about the importance of product design in legal technology, and specifically about a case study in which the contract lifecycle management company Agiloft brought in the legal tech design firm Theory and Principle to examine its user interface and user experience and make recommendations for improving them. When we return, we'll talk more about the process of that research, the recommendations that came out of it, and how Agiloft is incorporating those recommendations in its product roadmap. But first, let's hear about the sponsors who so generously support Law Next. Managing your law firm doesn't have to be a hassle. Practice Panther provides industry-leading solutions that close gaps in your billing cycle and take the headache out of mundane tasks like time tracking, sending documents for e-signature, processing e-payments, and more. See for yourself how Practice Panther can give you time back in your day by visiting practicepanther.com. My guest today, Nicole Bradick, founder and CEO of the legal tech design and development firm Theory and Principle, and Andy Wishart, Chief Product Officer at contract lifecycle management company Agiloft, are both highly experienced in designing legal technology products. Over the past year or so, their companies collaborated on a specific project to redesign Agiloft's CLM platform. As we return, I asked Bradick to elaborate on the process her company went through to evaluate and make recommendations on the Agiloft platform. What was the process that you went about to try and, do your research on the product design and try and come to some conclusions about what to recommend?
Yeah, so we start with a meeting internally with the Agiloft team to understand their perspective, where they, what their goals were. Of course, working for them, we want to make sure that we're meeting their needs. But then we sort of guide the process from there. We indicate what the personas are of the people that we'd like to talk to. They go out and help recruit those people. So, a big part of it is we want to talk to sort of builders and people who are using the application within Fortune 50 companies, or however we might define it. And then we have a strategist on our team who goes out and conducts all the research. He interviews these people. He, I think for the most part, was doing screen shares. So he would have them walk through their use of Agiloft and have them sort of indicate out loud as they're working through it, where there's frustrations. He would ask a lot of sort of open-ended questions to try to derive from them what matters most to them in sort of a redesign of the product. And then we take all of that sort of unstructured data. Our strategist takes tons of notes and we create some structure out of it, right? So we have this massive spreadsheet of all the conversations, and he starts to sort of categorize the little bits of insights by theme. Right. So there may be themes around like straight usability. There may be themes around one particular part of the process, whatever it might be. And then we pull those themes together and we present them to Agiloft in the form of an insight. So, I can try to think of what some of the insights were, but it was,
let me just ask you, do users necessarily know what they want, or does that even matter with the process that you're going through? It's not a matter of them knowing what they want so much as you trying to derive the roadblocks, the pain points, the speed bumps, whatever, as they're working through it.
That's right. We don't ask them what they want because people are pretty bad at telling you what they want. So it's really, it's part of it is just observation and listening and sort of translation of what we're hearing, right? And one of the top themes always came around sort of usability or intuitiveness. And then the sort of secondary thing that we were finding, there was a lot of commentary about the search functionality and how the search doesn't quite get you to what you need. So we did a bunch of redesign around just the search area, which is, such a small thing, but in such a massive product where you may have, a gajillion contracts, the search functionality is quite important. It's not as straightforward as like enter like Joe Smith contract and you get what you want. It's quite a bit more complex than that. So those are the kind of things that we were looking at, and we grouped into themes to sort of make recommendations to Agiloft.
And you have this background as the founder of Contract Express. It was your baby. And I'm wondering if you have any perspective on what it's like for a company to kind of throw open its product to that kind of analysis and becoming transparent, I guess, kind of about their product and about how users interact with their product.
Yeah, it takes a lot of strength to do that, particularly if it is your baby. You've nurtured this product over a number of years. You know it inside out. You've maybe made a lot of decisions on why it is designed the way it is designed. And to bring in an external agency to do some customer research, to make recommendations, it's tough. It takes a lot of guts to do that. And it's so important, though. It's so important to be able to go into those discovery sessions with users without any form of bias. And I've seen throughout my career where product and design teams have gone into product and user research with a certain hypothesis that they are almost so desperate to validate. So I do think it's tremendously important and useful to have a team that feel a little bit less connected to the product and are not going in with some specific outcomes in mind. And I genuinely think that actually the power and the role of a product management and design team is to be able to detach in that way and to hear that unfiltered response from the users, even if it is sometimes a difficult thing to hear, where your customer is saying, well, I find this particular design that you've done in this area not that intuitive.
Yeah. Just along the same lines, Nicole, how divergent were the views from when you talk to the stakeholders within the company and when you talk to users and customers outside the company? How aligned or misaligned were their own perspectives on the product?
I think this was a little bit different because I think the team at Agiloft had an inkling for what the issues were. We just dug in and got a lot more specific. Uh-huh. And I think that they just did not have that sense of specificity of like, okay, what exactly is the problem? Like, we know roughly we have some issues around this, but we don't really know exactly what the problem is. We certainly have had engagements like this where we have completely thrown off a product roadmap, where a team was sort of wedded to a certain set of features to come out, and then we have completely derailed that, and the feedback is like that. No, that's not going to be useful at all. Which great for the product team. It's a pain in the ass, of course, because you have to go and rework your whole plan, but saves you a whole lot of time and money.
Yeah. So when you get through this process of doing the research and you get to the point of making recommendations, what do the recommendations look like? What are you telling them?
Yeah. So the first thing that we offered them was a heuristic evaluation, which is essentially like a bunch of screenshots of the existing application and sort of identifying where it generally diverges from UX best practices. And then we actually redesigned some core parts of the application. So we took the insights that we had derived and some of the core functionality and actually provided mocked up redesigns of what that could look like, which it's then up to their team, do we implement some of it or all of it, or do we take inspiration from these or move on?
Yeah.
And then, when we receive those redesigns, whether those are in tools like Figma or InDesign, it's our role as a product team to work with our engineers to make that come to life, right? So when I joined, we were in that sort of middle of the point whereby our engineering team were bringing some of the recommendations, particularly around search. So for the release earlier this year, we really focused on improving that search experience. So it's really interesting now to take a look at the product and then look back at some of those design recommendations. And not all 100% of what Nicole had recommended had made it into that release. But we see this as an ongoing process, right? So the design doesn't stop. We're continuing to iterate and bring improvements both for the creators and also that important use case around the builders, how they build templates, how they build workflows, how they build reports. So that's all still to come on the roadmap as well.
Yeah. And Agiloft did not have a product team until you came in. Is that right? So you kind of came in to help. Did you come in to kind of help lead this redesign?
Well, exactly. So I think the engagement with theory and principle was the catalyst for Agiloft to transition into a more design-led approach to product development. And our CEO, Eric Laughlin, who joined 12 months back in the summer of 2020, one of the first things that he wanted to put in place was the full product and design team. So I came on board to establish that organization. Some of the individuals within my team have been part of Agiloft that have moved into a product role that worked with Nicole and her team during the engagement. And then we've subsequently built the team from there, bringing on user experience designers, other product managers as well.
So to what extent is this process iterative? I mean, Nicole, you make recommendations. Andy, you read them and decide how you want to try and implement them or not. But I mean, how do you validate that the recommendations were correct and that in fact are improving the experience for customers and users?
So I think there's a few ways. First of all, during the design process, if you are coming up with some new designs, before you build anything, you want to validate that with end users. So if you think of something like a tool like the design sprint, which is like a framework for understanding challenges, quickly coming up with a potential prototype, the most important step in that design sprint for me is that validation with the end users to get the feedback that you are going in the right direction. But once we've implemented a new design, there are other tools that we can use to get a sense of how well that is performing. So that might be through tools that look at the usage of the product, so how users are interacting with that new design. Are they interacting with it in a way that we are expecting? So we can look at things like adoption of the new user interface over the old user interface. And these are some of the tools that we can use to get a sense of whether we're going in the right direction.
Does that suggest that you roll out the new user interface and give users the option of going with that or staying with the legacy interface?
Well, I think change management is always something that's really important. And I think more so in a product that spans multiple departments within the organization. So, I see it's our job to help our customers with change. So as we push out new versions of the product, so if we think back to earlier this year with the new user interface, we do help our customers make that transition from old to new and not just push it on them.
Yeah. The CLM product is different than a lot of other kinds of products out there in the sense, as you said earlier, it's an enterprise product, it's a legal product, it spans different user groups within an enterprise. I mean, it can be sales or procurement or legal or, I don't know, finance. I'm not sure who else. But so how do you account for those different personas, those different user types in doing this kind of a research and incorporate that into what you develop?
Yeah, well, I think Nicole will agree that when you're conducting the research, you need to make sure that you've got a broad sample of those different personas and those different users, because they're all going to bring a different perspective. They'll all have a different set of problems that they're trying to solve, and they'll have different workflows as well. They may even have different experiences. So if you think of contract lifecycle management solutions that are spanning, sales teams as well as procurement teams, one of the things that sales teams want is to be able to work in the tools that they're accustomed to every day. So for us, that means building a user experience of Agiloft inside a tool inside a platform like Salesforce. So yeah, I think it's really important that when you're conducting that product or user research, you're spanning all of the personas, all of the stakeholders that are involved in a CLM solution. And there are so many: HR, finance, procurement, sales, as well as legal and legal ops.
Yeah. Nicole, anything to add to that on the just the personas and researching the personas?
No, I mean, I think we did a pretty good job casting a wide net when we were doing our research. Not much else to add there.
Yeah, all right. So Annie, I mean, you've alluded to this already, but what was kind of the end result of this for Agiloft? What did Agiloft learn? What did they do as a result of going through this process?
Yeah, I think we learn a lot of near-term things that we want to improve in terms of the overall design in the product, both from a creator's perspective, but also the builder's perspective. And that's been helpful to sort of define our roadmap over the coming releases. So we've released a number of the recommendations earlier this year. We have another release coming out in November, which will be providing some advanced, easier tools for the builders, particularly around how they create contract templates. So yeah, it really has helped us sort of prioritize aspects around this theme of ease of use within the product over the coming years. And it's then balancing that and integrating those priorities with other areas that we want to build out into the product. We've got a large focus around connected experiences. I mentioned Salesforce and embedding an Agiloft experience within Salesforce. One of the other things that we're really keen on in terms of meeting users where they are working in the tools that they're most used to is we're integrating Agiloft with Microsoft Teams so that users can get notifications or alerts to approving contracts directly within a Teams interface. So I think it's interesting as we look at that connected experience strategy that the approach from a user experience changes a little bit because you're thinking about how to work within the design framework of those other enterprise solutions as well.
Nicole, what about for you? I'm curious for you. I know you. I don't know how commonly you go through this. I know you build a lot of products, and I'm kind of curious about how the process differs when you're starting a product from scratch versus stepping into an existing product with an established user base and trying to go about looking at how to improve it or how to change it. How does that process differ for you?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So when it's a new product, we start up front just doing a ton of interviews around the problem. So, what's surrounding this problem you have? What is sort of, who are the people who touch the problem? Where are the things that matter most regarding the problem? And then we're doing some like prototyping and testing on prototypes. So it's not something that people have been in and using. So this kind of engagement is actually really fun for us because we get to see a product that's already delivering value and saying, how can we improve upon this? So we get a ton more data than we're able to get when it's a brand new product because there's tons of analytics. There's tons of users who have been using the product forever, and we get such rich insights. So it's a bit different just in how we approach the conversations, because, when we're testing on a prototype, we can fake it as much as we want, but it's not something anybody's using in real life. So that there's quite a bit more psychology that goes into those sessions, as opposed to like real pragmatic feedback from people who are actually using the product. And then obviously when we're building a new product, once it's out in the wild, then we start doing some testing on it. But it's still not that level of depth that we can get from an existing product. So it's a bit different in our approach, but overall the philosophy is the same, right? Let's understand how users are going to use this or are using this. Let's understand what matters most to them, and then figure out how to make that less painful for them.
How do companies know when they should go through a process like this?
I think they often know, but they just don't do it. Because it's a scary thing to say, okay, we're going to be hands off and let another organization come and poke around and talk to our users. I think that most companies that have been around for 5 years or more should have somebody independently come and look at their product and talk to their users. I think it probably doesn't happen much at all. Although certainly requests for us, I think over the past year, we just finished our annual retreat. So we were looking at data, and over the past year, the percent of our revenue that comes from legal tech companies has doubled. And it's a lot of engagements like this, design and research. We're typically not building for legal tech companies that are established. So I think that there's a recognition of the importance of it. I think it's just people need to get over the fear. And it's expensive. It's an expensive process. I'm not going to sugarcoat that either. It takes a lot of time for our team to get the knowledge of the product that your team has, and then to go out and spend a lot of time talking to your users. It takes time.
Andy, it's an expensive process. You just said, is it worth the expense? Was it worth the expense for Agiloft?
Oh, for sure, because for us, it was the catalyst of a longer change within Agiloft in terms of how we bring that sort of design-first approach to our prioritization on the roadmap. And it's laid a foundation for us to then build upon going forward, which is super exciting.
And I will say that there are things that you can do that are like baby steps that can be helpful. Like just having a UX team do a heuristic eval. So not even talking to your users, but just looking at your product and saying, okay, where does this diverge from UX best practices, can illuminate a lot of things that you just may not realize. Even if you have a designer on staff, I think, even on our team, when we're building a product, we have another designer that reviews all their work, because I would say that most legal tech products that are have been around for a little while, they may have a designer, they may have no designer at all. So having that sort of that feedback loop is really helpful, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think we've all experienced the fact that when something, as we talked about earlier, when something is your baby, you get a little bit of blinders around it, right? And you don't necessarily see the warts and whatever that it may have.
Well, and I have to tell you, that's the biggest issue with our engagements with law firms, right? Because they don't like to have us talk to their clients. And so it's quite challenging to build successful products when we can't even have access to the end user. And when everybody involved is certain they know exactly what the end user wants. So those can be a bit challenging. And one of the things that we're doing, actually, we'll be announcing it soon, is to create a pool of users, like a captive pool of users of, legal ops people, in-house people, lawyers, law firm people, law firm admin, that are just available to test products so that we can hopefully bridge some of that gap.
You're going to have them all locked in a big warehouse up in Maine somewhere or something?
Well, our first thought was that we would offer, we were saying, what can we offer to people who are incredibly busy, and don't need our money? When the thing we came up with was, shipping them some live lobsters from Maine.
Perfect. Love it. Good.
That would be a good incentive.
Yeah.
I think so.
And Andy, is there anything else? You've talked about some of your product plans coming up. Anything else? What else is ahead for you and Agiloft?
Well, I think we're really super focused on this sort of concept of democratizing CLM, and I think design has a massive role to play in that. And a lot of the work that we've done recently in engagement with Theory and Principle, and then subsequent to that, is really focused on how to make life easier for the builders. The concept of democratizing CLM is sort of multi-leveled. At the first level, we're trying to enable anyone within the business to interact with the contracting process, whether that is creating a contract or whether that is just seeing the contract through the workflow or getting signatures or managing the contract after it's been signed. We want to move away from this sort of older thinking of that is the domain of a select few users within the legal department to it being something company-wide. But then I think there's a next level down in that democratization, that if you think about the role of legal and legal ops, they are responsible for codifying their knowledge, their expertise to be able to support these self-service types approach. So it's not about replacing lawyers through automation. It's about helping them level up to codify their expertise so that they could be working on more complex legal issues. So we want to make the tools really accessible to them as well. So rather than IT being involved in changing a workflow, we want the legal ops and the contract managers to be able to change those workflows and templates. And I see the role of design and user experience itself being democratic. Nicole's talked about interviewing customers to get feedback on perhaps designs. I think that, there's nothing more democratic than, say, a design process and a design sprint where you've got people from different parts of the business providing input onto a problem or input onto solutions and helping validate those solutions. So democratization of CLM and the CLM process is top of mind for us right now.
Yeah, it's got to be a significant competitive advantage as well. I mean, this is a crowded market, and there are a lot of players in it right now, a lot of buzz around this market. So to what extent is that part of the consideration here?
I think it is. We've always, at Agiloft, been pretty clear on where we differentiate against the competition, and it's on that flexibility and extensibility on the platform. But that does then present a challenge. If you've got complete and utter flexibility, that sometimes means additional complexity. So for us, a real focal point is maintaining the flexibility and extensibility, but delivering that in a way in which the builders, the subject matter experts, whether they're creating templates or building AI models or defining workflows, can do so in a frictionless way.
All right, Nicole, anything else? Anything? What's ahead for you? Anything else going on with you guys?
Lots of things going on.
Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, but we're as a company, we're continuing to do the kind of service work and working with legal tech companies and law firms and nonprofits, but we're also moving into more of like a hybrid product service business, which is fun for us to be bringing our own products to market now after, having built and launched so many products for others in the legal space. We get to sort of practice what we preach and bring our years of experience into delivering products to market. So that's pretty exciting. That's what we're focused on right now.
Fantastic. Well, thanks to both of you for taking the time to be with me today and to share this story of your collaboration around redesign of Agiloft. It's been really interesting.
Thanks
for
Bob.
doing it. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
I've been speaking with Nicole Bradick, founder and CEO of the legal tech design and development firm Theory and Principle, and Andy Wishart, Chief Product Officer at contract lifecycle management company Agiloft. Thanks to both of them for taking the time today to be on Law Next. What are your thoughts on today's show? Share them by tweeting us at Law Next Podcast. Law Next is produced, engineered, and edited by Populous Radio. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of Law Next.